Hey everybody, Dr. Tammy here. I'm going to share with you some really amazing stuff tonight, and I hope that you have a few minutes to spend with me because it's some nerdy science. But if you've ever struggled with weight loss and you have just thought there's something wrong, if I just knew the science, if I just knew what to do, and if you've ever been told you just need to eat less and exercise more, well, there is some truth to that. But if that hasn't worked for you, there's something else going on. And so if you stay to the end with me, I promise I'm going to share something really special that could help you a lot, and I'm going to break it all down for you. So I'm going to try to be really brief as possible and keep it really simple about what happens when you gain weight and lose weight. So when you're younger and your hormones are balanced, then it's a lot easier to do the energy in, energy out thing. But as we age, or if you have hormone imbalances, or if you have especially female problems, perimenopause, menopause, any sort of menstrual irregularities, anything that's gone on in your life, especially as a female, your metabolism is going to really be challenged. And I'm going to explain a little bit of what that is. But there's a term that I have coined over the years called hormone resistant weight loss. And a lot of people hear the word hormone and they immediately think estrogen and they immediately think breast cancer and they just shut down. But there are literally hundreds of different hormones in your body, and they all affect very different parts of the body, and some are pretty specifically metabolism related hormones. So if you don't understand those, you'll just keep, rocking your head and doing all sorts of things in fad diets. So if you want to be done with the fad diets and the fad programs and the next latest keto thing, then you have to understand the science. So let's just get right into this. So there's very specific ways that you can look at the way you calorie in and calorie out, the way the expenditure of energy happens. So if we go down to a little bit of nerdy science and we just ask, when you lose weight, where does the fat go? So one of the things that people get hung up on is that they think calories are a unit of mass, meaning they think it's a solid unit. And calories are just energy. So energy is used to supply the body, to supply the cells. And so what you want to do is you want to use your energy efficiently. Well, people just say, well, go exercise. Well, that's all fine and well, but if you have certain metabolic hormones out of whack, you're going to be exhausted. And the last thing you're going to want to go do is exercise. And so there are very specific ways to exercise and very specific ways to eat that will work with your science. So if you look at eating some food, which if we did the stoichiometry of this equation, which I'm not going to do, but let's just say this is a carbohydrate, so it's got some carbon in it. And then your body takes in oxygen, which is what you breathe in when you breathe, and it blows out CO2 and water. So when you eat fat in your diet, dietary fat, it either gets used or it gets stored. And when it gets stored as fat, that's not actually fat, that's adipose cells. And you're born with all the adipose cells, all the fat cells that you're ever going to have. They change, you're not the same cellular structure you were when you were a baby, but the same number is genetically determined. And so when you lose weight or gain weight, it is swelling of the fat cells. So if you've ever seen somebody 400 pounds, they don't really have that many more fat cells than you do. They're just really swollen. And whether that's inflammation or whether that's hormones that are out of balance or metabolic shutdown, it's all just science, right? So it's the swelling of the fat cells. And so when they swell, we look big and we look fat. And it's not only that we don't like it, but it can be very unhealthy. So where does fat go when you burn it? Well, it comes out as CO2. So you literally breathe out your fat, which is crazy. So that's important. Why sleep is so important, and good quality sleep, because a lot of that CO2 is burned off in your sleep. Excuse me. And it comes out as water too. So that can be in urine or sweat or any form of water that the body loses. So this is very important right here, because this part of the equation is the hormonal part where it actually burns. So you have to have the hormones working properly to burn this food and oxygen into CO2 and water. So what kind of hormones do that? Well, there are fat burning and fat storing hormones. So your fat burning hormones are things like thyroid and testosterone, and your fat storing hormones are estrogen, insulin, cortisol, and many, many others. There's things like ghrelin and leptin, and I won't get into all those, although I will kind of skim over those just a little bit. But the name of the game here is to increase your oxygen content. So one of the best ways that you can exercise for this is to do something called intermittent exercise, because what that does is it makes you breathe harder. And a lot of people think that if you're going to exercise that you should get your heart rate up, and that's true, but the only reason getting your heart rate up is important is because you consume more oxygen. And so when you look at energy and you look at calories in your food, and this is all just units of energy moving around, what you want to do is in the burn process, literally calories and kilojoules and all that is the movement of energy. So you have to maximize these. And sometimes, you have to come see me if you're menopausal and everything's just out of whack. But there are ways that you can do this. And I'm going to share some supplements with you that will work to do this as well. So the hormones of weight loss, what is the problem? Well, people get hungry, right? So ghrelin and leptin are the main hormones of hunger. So ghrelin, I think of it like a little monster, like a little gremlin, is the hormone that triggers hunger in you. And it is triggered by other hormones, but it's also triggered by when your stomach shrinks down, when the stomach actually doesn't have any food in it. So it tells you you're hungry and then you go eat again. So that's why you shouldn't eat a whole lot all the time, because your stomach stretches and those receptors don't work as well. So you have low energy. There's a hormone called adiponectin, and that actually helps the cells work better. I'm going to explain that here in just a second. Or let's say you have excess sugar storage or you crave carbs all the time. Well, that's usually going to be an insulin type issue. And insulin is a hormone that stores sugar in your body as fat. Let's say you have stress. So your body doesn't know the difference in being chased by a bear or your boss being mad at you or chemicals in different things in your environment, right? So, or hormone imbalances. It doesn't know the difference. So stress is just a cortisol response and many other hormones too that play into that. But stress is very real when it comes to your metabolism. And let's say you have a slow metabolism. Well, usually that's things like thyroid or any of the other fat burning or fat storing hormones that you need to address. So let's talk about the GI tract and what happens here. So this is the esophagus, person's head. This is the stomach here. This is the liver here and the pancreas and the intestines. So what happens in the stomach is as food comes down here and the sugar gets broken down from what we call complex carb, which is just a bunch of sugar molecules attached together, get broken down into simple carbs. And then those simple carbs then get absorbed into the GI tract and then either get used or get stored. So one thing that you can do is when you eat a lot of sugar, make sure that you get up and move, because if you are sedentary, you're going to store it and your body's going to say, hey, she's not using this right now, let's store it for later. There's something that bodybuilders do and people who are very athletic, and they call it carb loading. So the way that works is they eat a lot of carbs right before they exercise, because what happens is that those carbs go right into the muscle for use. And so the muscles work even harder and have more energy. But if you eat a donut and you go sit down, it's just going to go to storage. So also, the quality of your food matters a lot, because the way the minerals are broke down, your magnesiums, your B12s, all of those work in the cell with you. So really pay attention to the quality of your food. So carb loading before exercise should not be Cheerios and Pop-Tarts. It should be healthy carbs. Okay, so in the kidney, in the stomach, what happens is as the food comes here, the carbohydrates get broken down and get absorbed. The pancreas secretes the insulin that tells your body whether to store it or keep it. You've probably heard of diabetes. So in diabetes, when insulin stops working, the whole system kind of shuts down and your carbohydrate storage is off. You start gaining weight. Eventually you have to go on insulin. And when we talk about resistance is, like when you exercise with resistance, it's a stretch, it's a pushing of the system. Resistant means almost like, no, don't, push away, right? So any kind of resistance, whether it's insulin resistance or thyroid resistance, it's when it's not working properly. So hormone resistant weight loss is when your hormones aren't working and you're not losing weight. So we want to address the resistance. Okay, then we have leptin and ghrelin, which stretch the stomach until whether you're hungry or full. And leptin also helps. There's something called leptin resistance. Leptin also helps signal the body that you're full. And so you want a lot of leptin. And leptin is also regulated by sleep. So again, we kind of come back to the importance of good sleep. And so there's also some things called leptin, and they bind to ghrelin, so that's another hormone protein mix that helps that work better as well. Okay, so if we go over here to the nucleus of a cell, and a cell is just a particle that's inside your body that makes all your proteins, and it dictates everything that happens. So we're going to go way down into some nerdy microbiology here. But inside the cell is this centerpiece called the nucleus. And inside that is your DNA. I think most people probably know what DNA is. And that DNA dictates all the proteins and all the proteins that become hormones. So every single process in your body is driven by hormones. So it's super important that these hormones or messengers are in balance, because every single process happens from this DNA, and it's a feedback loop of what's happening. In the nucleus, there's something called AMPK, and you don't have to know this, there won't be a quiz, but it stands for phosphokinase, and what that does is it literally is the pilot light of the cell, and there's lots of things that stimulate that AMPK. Thyroid can stimulate it, there are some medications that can stimulate it, but if your pilot light is out, you know how that goes, right? Your water's not warm, if anything's out that creates energy in your home or heats your water, if that's out, then you don't have heat. And remember when we talked about this energy in and energy out, heat is very important for that process. So at the level of the cell, the AMPK is driven by lots of different things. And then there's something called mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of your cell, which actually dictates the energy levels in the nucleus where the DNA is. So all of this is really important to be balanced. So I'm going to talk about some supplements that can work for these different aspects. So I'm going to switch out here just a little bit. And all these supplements are things that you can get at the health food store that will help with all these aspects of what I just talked about. So in the stomach, where carbohydrates break down into simple carbs, there are supplements that come from white kidney bean extract, and we call these phase 2 carb controllers. And what they do are they are what's called alpha amylase blockers. And you don't have to know that, but what does an alpha amylase blocker do? Well, it binds to the receptors to tell the carbohydrate enzymes to not break them down. So if you eat carbs and they're not broken down into simple sugars, they can't get stored as fat, right? So the alpha amylase blockers are what keep you from absorbing it. So we're going to start at the top. So in the stomach, if you're not absorbing the sugar and it's not going into the system, that helps, right? And since there's so many carbs in our society, I always recommend that you eat healthy, but it is really hard to avoid all the carbs that are out there. So to be able to have some healthy carbs and a few snacks every once in a while, it's a very powerful thing, right? And it also helps you with carb cravings, because when you don't have all that excess sugar going into your bloodstream, insulin chills out. Insulin's your sugar storage hormone, and it stops being so resistant, like insulin resistance. And so once that chills out, then you don't get those spikes, and then you don't get the craving of the sugar. I personally have taken alpha amylase inhibitors for probably 2 years now, and I started out with a very high insulin level, and the last few insulin levels that I've done on myself personally, I've gone from the 40s on an insulin level, on a fasting insulin, down to 9. So my insulin is doing really well now, and I'm a female who's had a lot of PCOS and insulin resistance type conditions. So that's really important to my health, not just to my weight, but to my health. Also, white kidney bean extract causes leptins, other proteins, to bind to the hormone ghrelin. Remember, ghrelin, the little gremlin, makes you hungry. So when it binds to gremlin, you don't have as much appetite. And all of these supplements have tons of peer-reviewed science. So you can go out there and you can search these ingredients, but when I talk about peer-reviewed science, these are journal articles from JAMA, from all the high-end Journal of Endocrinology and Nutrition, And you can find all this research. And the interesting thing is that white kidney bean extract has been shown to be as effective, if not more effective, than some of the diabetes medications that we use. And hardly any side effects. You know, those diabetes medications like metformin and stuff like that, they have tons of GI side effects. And so very little side effects. So it's a much safer profile and also can help with all these issues that people who will eventually become diabetic have to deal with. Okay, Salacia reticulata. So what that does is it's a carbohydrate inhibitor to the cells. So if we were to take white kidney bean extract, and you weren't breaking down the sugar anyway, but what sugar did get broken down couldn't get into the cells, then this is a great supplement to inhibit the absorption into the cells. And remember when I showed you the picture with the DNA and the cellular structure, if you can't get the sugar into the cells and into the places where it's going to trigger the DNA to create certain proteins based on what's in there, then that's a good thing, right? Okay, berberine. Berberine actually activates AMPK, and it's interesting because there is a diabetic medication, metformin, that I just mentioned, that will stimulate the pilot light. AMPK is the pilot light of the cell, and it can also stimulate all of the energy that's happening in the cell. So AMPK is very, very important, and thyroid actually stimulates AMPK too. So does fasting. So not only intermittent exercise is really good to increase your O2 because you just work harder when you do intermittent exercise, but intermittent fasting will create that fasting state where all of these proteins are triggered to work maximally with your science. So what is intermittent fasting? Well, I like to say intermittent eating because fasting sounds bad. So intermittent eating is just eating during a certain window of the day, and that could be like from noon to 5. You're sleeping during the night, so, well, if you sleep nights or work days, whatever, but when you're sleeping, there's a period of time where you're not eating, so that's easy, right? So you just pick a smaller time window during the waking hours of your day when you eat, and that will stimulate a fasting state. Here's an interesting thing. They did a research study, many of them actually, on mice, and they decreased their calorie intake, essentially creating a fasting state in them. And what they found is that mice who were calorie restricted actually lived longer. So this is about your health too. You know, it's interesting because our ancestors didn't have all this food abundance all the time, and the food abundance that we have is probably not the healthiest food in the world, but I mean, they didn't have the opportunity to snack all the time, especially like the ancestors that were, you know, much more primitive. Food just wasn't available. I mean, the drive-thru at McDonald's wasn't available. So that whole aspect of eating during small windows, our bodies were made to work with a semi-fasting state. And I'm not talking about going days without eating, but a semi-fasting state's good. So when you are intermittent eating, it's really important that you hydrate well. So when you hydrate well, the cellular structures actually work more efficiently. So when I talk about the fat cell swelling and shrinking, water actually helps the magnesium and the B12s and all that transfer much easier because it's just got all those electrolytes moving all those electrolytes around. So it's very, very important that you hydrate. Okay, Rhodiola rosea is what's called a cold root adaptogen. It's found in certain plants and roots in the cold parts of Asia and Europe. And what they did when they studied this is they found that adaptogen means adapt, right? And so these proteins were specifically meant and studied to help plants, and since we kind of have same O2 and CO2 structures, to adapt to their environment. They also work as, we call them adaptogens, also to help with cortisol movement and other norepinephrines and adrenal stimulants and things like that. So it actually helps reduce stress. And again, stress is a hormonal response. It's not just, you know, having a bad situation or a bad day at work. Stress is so multifactorial and it's very hormonal. Okay, raspberry ketones. This is interesting because they create something called adiponectin stimulation. And adiponectin is a hormone that's made from your fat cells. And when you're in a calorie restricted state, which all these things above here almost make a calorie restricted state. So even if you're eating, but the sugar's not getting absorbed, your body thinks that you're in a calorie restricted state. So it's really cheating the system, right? So once you're in this calorie restricted state, then the fat cells start secreting adiponectin, which will actually increase the powerhouse in the cell, the mitochondria. And this is an interesting thing too. Have you ever heard diabetics say that when they wake up in the morning, their sugar is high, but they haven't had any sugar yet? Well, during the night and during the day, but during the night in diabetics, they make a lot of sugar from their own liver, which is kind of crazy because your body makes most of your liver and most of your cholesterol. Your liver makes most of your cholesterol and most of your sugar. We call that gluconeogenesis. And so as it's making its own sugar, if your body's making sugar and you're not even eating sugar, but your body's making sugar, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. And it's really hard when your body has a lot of sugar around. Now you become more insulin resistant because sugar is just saturating your whole system. So this is really a cool thing to have raspberry ketones because it actually keeps the liver from making sugar in your body. Fennel seed extract actually helps this whole process with the calorie restriction mimic. And it mimics intermittent fasting. So you can cheat a little bit. So you can broaden your window of your intermittent fasting period. Let's say you committed to noon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You can broaden that window a little bit. And if you're taking the fennel seed extract, it tricks your body into thinking that you are in a fasting state. The way that I mentioned the mice, they live longer with the intermittent fasting or the reduced calorie states. It's also because that reduces oxidative stress. So you've heard of oxidation, that's when the cells break down. And when you have oxidative stress, you age faster. Your brain ages faster, your skin, every cell in you ages faster. So you want to reduce that oxidative stress. Chromium picolinate, that's been around for a long time. And it actually helps a mineral called magnesium get into the cell. And we are extremely magnesium deficient society. And even if you eat from the Garden of Eden, it's really hard to get enough magnesium. Magnesium helps with cellular contraction. Magnesium helps if people have migraines. It can relax the muscles in your head, so the tension, headaches. It can relax your blood vessels. You know, it's funny, when I used to deliver babies in my residency program, if the moms had high blood pressure, we didn't put them on blood pressure medications because they're dangerous to the baby. We put them on magnesium. We put them on magnesium drips. The blood pressure would come right down. If you have slow bowels, and a lot of people with slow thyroid will have slow bowels, magnesium will relax the small bowel and actually pull in water, which helps you with any constipation issues that you might have. So magnesium is so important, but it also helps with insulin resistance and with diabetes and things like that. So chromium, super important. And it also decreases the sugar conversion to fat as storage. So lots of different mechanisms. Won't go into all that nerdy science, but super important. Okay, when you're trying to lose weight, serotonin is really important. That's your happy hormone. And if you're not content, you're more likely to stress eat. So if you can have something that will help with your serotonin levels, help stabilize them, then you're ahead of the game, right? So we're attacking all these different places where carbs are stored in the stomach and where they're absorbed into the intestines and where they go into the fat cell, and when you get in the mitochondria and the cellular energy, things happen. So serotonin is a hormone that is your sort of happy, you know, Prozac came out and it kept more serotonin around and everybody was happy. The problem with that is that, you know, serotonin also gets resistant just like any other hormone. And so that's why people can be on Prozac and medications like that and they just stop working because the receptors get saturated and then you become serotonin resistant. So that can be an issue too. So 5-HTP is a natural supplement that converts into serotonin and can really help with sleep. Remember, sleep, you burn off your oxygen into CO2 at night while you sleep. So sleep is super important, and sleep also allows the metabolism to reset. So 5-HTP is great. In the daytime, when you need extra energy, green tea can actually give you extra energy. It's something called catechins in green tea that act like caffeine in the system. So caffeine can help wake you up and give you more energy, but you don't want to rely on just caffeine alone because it can affect your adrenals over time. But if you're using it in conjunction with other supplements, that help it all work better, just for a little boost in energy. And green tea and the catechins can actually increase your metabolism, which can turn on the AMPK in the cell. So that's really important too. Okay, magnesium, we just talked about magnesium, the importance, and also it helps with muscle contraction. So if you're trying to build muscle, magnesium is super important for that as well. Okay, B12, everybody knows about B12, right? It gives you more energy, people love B12 shots, but it actually boosts your red blood cells. So why is that important? If you boost your red blood cells carry oxygen. If you can carry more oxygen, remember the equation that I did at the beginning of this was that you take food plus oxygen, burn it into CO2 and water. The more oxygen you can take in, which is why intermittent exercise is so important, because you really work so much harder than if you just do straight cardio because of those intermittent periods, that when you have that extra oxygen carrying capacity, it just helps the stoichiometry of that biochemistry equation work better. Then there's potassium. Most people are familiar with potassium. And I always tell people it's really important that if you are going to do intermittent exercise, water is great and you want to hydrate the cells. But here's the problem. Remember I said fat cells swell, and that's why you gain weight. So if you just take in water in fat cells and you just saturate the fat cells, or the water's not moving through the system, the bloodstream, and it just spills out into the tissues, that's bad. But when you have electrolytes like potassium, magnesium, sodium that are moving all those electrolytes around, that's what you really need to keep the balance going. And I always tell people, don't do those Gatorade drinks. They have so much sugar in them. But maybe even just a pinch of sea salt in your water. And that's if you're working out really hard and you're really taking a lot of oxygen, doing that intermittent exercise. If you're just casually going for a walk, you don't need that. But the thing about sea salt is that it's got all the other minerals in it. It's not just table salt, which is just sodium chloride, but it's got potassium and magnesium and iodine and all the other minerals. So a little pinch of sea salt in your water when you're exercising can help all that work better. And then enzymes, digestive enzymes actually help all of these things process in the stomach. So if you're going to take these supplements, you want them to get absorbed. And you want to take good quality supplements so that you know that the good quality is going to get absorbed as well. So here's my little plug at the end, and I promised you I had like a little surprise and a little good thing, is that when I did all this nerdy science, and I've worked with patients over 20 years trying to come up with the solution to everything, is that I came up with a supplement that has everything in it. And I came up with the combinations that have been studied over the years. They're in the right combinations that work best with the metabolism of human, and especially humans that have all of these issues too. So anyway, it's my carb melt product. And you can go out and buy these separate, and you can do your research and buy good quality stuff, but I put it all in one thing, and it makes it a lot easier. There are over 13 ingredients in here. So if you just did the math, we're talking, even if you got cheap stuff at Walgreens and you could get these for $10 each, which most of these things are anywhere from $30 to $70, you know, you'd be looking at almost $150 if you bought all these separately. So we just had a price reduction because we're doing so well, and you know, most people in our economy are raising prices. So I just want to get this out to everybody. So we just decreased our prices on the website because we want to make it more available. And that's my mission, is to help people be healthy. But also my mission is to make it easy, because I'm busy, I'm a mom, I'm a doctor, I have so much going on, that the important thing to me was to help people understand the science, because the word doctor in Latin means to teach. So if I can teach you how to do this, you can do it more effectively. You can still live your life, your best life, be healthy and well. So anyway, again, you can get these supplements. You don't have to get it from me, but go to our website if you're interested in checking it out. I have lots of nerdy science on there and all the research that backs all this up. And there's so much more out there too, but I have pages and pages and pages of research. So go check it out. And I just want you all to have the healthiest, most wonderful, healthy life. I just can't say that enough. And I love you all very much. And I know this was a lot of nerdy science and a little long-winded, but I thought it was really important to share how all this works together. Okay, I'll see you later. Love you. Bye.